Welcome to my tutorial for Marvel Land for the arcade. This was actually a game I owned on the Sega Genesis. I got it at a flea market real cheap when I was young. And it was a pretty difficult game for me at the time. I think I got pretty far, but I don't think I was able to beat it back then. I believe I beat it much later. But the arcade version is kind of like an expert difficulty version of the Genesis version. Of course, it is the original Marvel Land, but it's a lot harder than the console port to the Genesis. But the game is strange in that, it starts off easy, and it can lead you to believe that it's more of a kid's game, like a simple game. As you can see, it's really not too challenging until you get to about World 3. Once you get to World 3 in the arcade version, that's when the difficulty really spikes up to an extreme degree compared to the rest of the game. And then it just becomes kind of a trial and error, slog. It can be quite difficult. So it can kind of trick you into believing that it's an easy game. As far as the Genesis port, I remember it was much easier, but I haven't played it in so long, I don't remember what the exact differences were. I don't really remember when the Genesis one became difficult, especially, back when I played it, I was a lot less skilled at games, so I don't know if it would provide much of a challenge at all for me now. It might be a little bit challenging. I don't think it would be too hard for me, especially after beating this version of the game, which is much harder than what I remember of the Genesis version. So in this game, you have unlimited continues. There's no tricks or anything at the end of the game where you're sent to the beginning of the entire game or anything. You have unlimited continues until the end. And most of the stages have checkpoints, like mid-level checkpoints where you'll start. Some of them have a few checkpoints, I believe. But if you run out of lives and go to the continue screen, then you'll start the beginning of that stage you got to. So if you're on, say, stage 3-2, and you get a mid-checkpoint when you lose a life, you'll start midway through the stage maybe, and then if you lose the rest of your lives, you'll start at the beginning of 3-2. And that's pretty much how the game works. So now in this tutorial version, the way I edit it was I only showed my lives where progress was made. So if I get to a checkpoint in the stage and then die, I'll show that death because that was new progress. I got farther in the stage. I didn't want to edit it to where everything was like one seamless, clean type of thing because that's not how I actually played the game. So it's kind of deceptive to do that. And it usually looks kind of shitty anyway. I have done it with earlier videos where I would explain that, but I ended up dropping that way of editing. I just don't think it's too easy to tell what's going on. It made it confusing in a lot of the videos when trying to demonstrate. Tutorial version for me is more of a demonstration, so it's not meant to be a straight-through gameplay like this is how I played with, very little fuck-ups and all that. But it's just to get to the point and demonstrate, how my strategies would look if they were, when they're executed, the way I meant to execute them, basically, when I had a clean playthrough of an area. That's the footage that's used. So you'll see, the reason I show those deaths is so you can see some of the mid-level checkpoints and things like that, and you'll understand how the stages work. Because if I cut that out, then it makes it confusing. Like, if you're trying to learn the game, it's useful to know, say you're stuck on a certain level, it would be nice to know where the checkpoint is in the stage. Just so like, all right, if I get here, at least I get a checkpoint. It helps. But what I'm going to recommend that all players do is that if you're playing this on an emulator, I recommend using, save state practice. You really want to use save state practice in a game like this. So what you want to do is make save states at various sections in each stage. That might give you trouble, and just make sure you got them down. Once you learn the path in this game, you can pretty much memorize your path. There's a few things that seem a little random to me, but there's probably a way to get them the same each time, if you move exactly the same like a machine each time. But there's a few things that feel random because they can change quite a bit. And I don't know if you can manipulate them the same each time. Like there's these spikes on the final stage that I'm not sure if there's any way to get them to fall at the same rate, which I'll get into later. But for the most part, you can memorize most everything. The projectiles, everything can pretty much be memorized, and you can find a path. And that's really the goal of this game. And, games like this from this time period, you want to find the path that allows you to get through. So it's a lot of trial and error with save states, and you just want to keep practicing and finding that path. And once you find a path that seems to work, you want to keep practicing that path to make sure that you have it down. Now, of course, once you stop loading states and just commit suicide, you'll go back to the beginning of the stage, and then you'll be able to use whatever you learned. You know what I mean? But you want to have it down pretty well so that you don't have to keep redoing the entire stage again and again. You know, it saves you a lot of time. And that's what I recommend for all these kind of games. But yeah, for these rock, paper, scissors games, if you know how the game works of rock, paper, and scissors, there's various things like, I believe paper defeats rock and rock defeats scissor and things like this. And if you're not familiar with the game, you may actually want to look up the rules just to see what beats what. If you've never seen this kind of game before, rock, paper, scissor, because that's what this is based on. You don't need to be able to read the Japanese, but you do need to be able to understand what symbol beats what symbol in the rock, paper, scissors game. So now, if you don't understand any of that and you don't want to bother looking it up, you can just kind of get lucky. But just be aware that if you don't get lucky and you fuck up, you're going to keep getting sent back to the beginning of the stage until you're able to beat that boss. So, it would be easier just to look up the rules and try to familiarize yourself with them if you're not. But aside from that, once you know the rules of what beats what in rock, paper, scissors, there's another part to it. If I believe the way it works, if the boss has a symbol, like say scissors, and you have paper, that means the boss is going to be able to hit you and land a hit on you. So the boss is going to take his hit. So what you want to do is block, because you can anticipate that the boss is going to try to strike you with the hammer, so you block. And you press up to block. So just keep that in mind. I think you have to hold up to block. Now, if you block at the wrong time, I believe you get penalized for that and lose a point too. So you have to anticipate what move is going to happen when. It's a little tricky. Now, if you get the right symbol, say you get paper and the boss is at rock, that means you can now hit the boss. So now you're going to have to hit the, I believe, the action button will use your hammer on the boss. So that's just how it works. And then you just have to be aware of who has rock, paper, scissors and what it's weak against, etc. So you do have to be familiar with the rules of that game to have a good chance at that. And you have to react quickly. You don't have a lot of time to think about, how to react. But the idea is that you're going to try to block a strike if the boss tries to strike you, if he has the right symbol to strike you. Now, if you strike at the wrong time when you don't have the right symbol to be able to strike the boss, I believe you also lose a point for that. And I believe it's the first person to get 2 or 3 points that wins the match. Though sometimes I lost and I wasn't sure exactly what the fuck was going on. So I'm not 100% sure on how many points you need or how all the penalties work. It does show some kind of score on the left and right sides of the screen. So after this stage, I believe after this world is complete, I believe this is World 2. After you complete this world, you're gonna be at the first difficulty spike of the game. So far, it's pretty easy, pretty fun. It feels like a pretty cheerful game. Not really a little kid's game. I mean, you still need to have some skill, but it feels like it could have been kind of a kid's game for the time that these kind of games came out. I mean, there were much harder games that were marketed towards kids at the time. But I mean, it can be still a little challenging. You do have to pay attention and, still do well. You can ride on top of those jetpack guys. But yeah, after this world, you're going to see that it spikes up a large degree. And then the game suddenly becomes very hard. Now, luckily, it's a short game, but there's going to be, like the last sets of stages, there's probably going to be at least 6 very hard stages or something like that. So, expect that. Now, there's bonus points and stuff you can get through jumping through those targets, which you shouldn't really give a shit about unless you're playing for score. But this tutorial is just showing you how I beat the game and the strategies I used. I found a really good trick for the last boss that makes him really easy. But you still do have to beat that stupid rock, paper, scissors game, so you're going to want to get decent at that. But by the time you get to the end of the game and you fail enough times, you'll probably figure out how it works. That's one mechanic of the game. I don't really like that aspect in the boss fights with the rock, paper, scissors. It can be kind of tricky sometimes to read exactly what's going on, but you do get used to it. Now, this is one of the easy roller coaster levels, quite an easy one. But later on, we're going to have ones that are pretty difficult. But, again, this game hasn't reached its difficulty spike yet. It's still trying to, trick you into putting money into it since it's an arcade game. And, it makes you feel confident, like, this is not too hard. I got this shit. And then it'll spike up. And it kind of just comes out of nowhere. Where it gets drastically more difficult, it's a really big spike. But if you're willing to beat, the first difficult level, then it gives you a taste of what you can expect. Though it does get quite a bit harder later on, but it'll give you a taste of what to expect if you're willing to tolerate that kind of gameplay and trial and error type of shit and learn it. As long as you can execute that decently, then you'll know if you want to play the rest of the game, because it does get much harder. But it's a good start if you can beat the first difficult stage. Now, at this point, I don't think the game has really gotten very difficult at all. And remember, I'm talking relatively. I'm not saying that it's not challenging, but I'm just talking about compared to where the game ends up going. I don't think it's shown its teeth yet. I didn't have too much trouble until I got farther into the game. I think around World 3 is where I started dying a lot. And prior to that, I think I was kind of blazing through most of this. Now, there are power-ups, too, that I didn't mention. There's a power-up that gives you this lineup of guys that you can kind of like whip around, and it hurts the enemies and kills the enemies and stuff. And there's also wings where you can fly. Now, I guess the good thing about my tutorial, and I haven't seen this shown online at all, with a lot of my arcade tutorials are like this. I play checkpoint to checkpoint, meaning I don't reset the game when I lose my power-ups. A lot of times in these games you want to keep your power-ups for the whole game to make it easier, but I don't do that. I play checkpoint to checkpoint, so it means that I'm starting each checkpoint with no starting power-ups, and I'm beating them. So I'm showing how to do it without any starting power-ups. Most videos you see online, people are not really, they're either cheating or they know the game so well that they don't die, and they keep all their power-ups. But you're not going to see that much at all with me. I rarely ever have any power-ups. Occasionally I'll get the wings, but it's very rare that I have any power-ups. So I'm going to show you how to beat the game without any starting power-ups. So that alone is going to allow you to beat the game. Now, another major thing that I should have mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is the Japanese ROM of the arcade game. Now, when I played the US ROM of the arcade game, it crashed at the very end, or around the end areas. The game crashed on me and I couldn't go any farther. So what that meant was I had to start the game over again on the Japanese game, and I had hoped that the Japanese ROM worked. So I worked my way back through the game from the beginning and hoping that this would work, and the Japanese one did end up working. I saw playthroughs of the Japanese one online, so I assumed it would probably work. So I just went with that. I don't know how to get the US version to work. I don't know if there's a working version out there, but just be aware that I would avoid the US version for that reason, unless you know that it works. Now, I believe there were some differences between the Japanese and US versions I noticed, such as some stages that were harder in the US version were easier in the Japanese version, and vice versa. So they're not identical from what I remember. So either way, this game, very hard once it gets going. I don't know which one is the harder version, the US or the Japanese, because, like I said, I didn't get to finish the US version. So I can't make a comparison. Normally, I always start with the U.S. version of games, since that's where all the games that I'm in the U.S. So whenever I played games, that's where they originated from. So that's usually what I start with. But I made an exception for this. So you can pretty much see what I'm doing here. I don't believe you can bounce off of these alligators. You just have to either jump over them or under them. Or just, go when they're not coming up. But it's basic, just trial and error. You may have to practice in sections a little bit, as I mentioned. But after you defeat this guy, you'll see the difficulty spike up. I believe all you have to do here is mash the button for this guy. I believe it's super easy. And I'm using a rapid fire controller, so of course I immediately switch to auto fire and just hold it down. And I believe that's all I had to do to beat that guy. Super easy. Now, if you're mashing, I don't know if you have to mash really hard. I'm not sure. I use turbo whenever it's useful on any old games. Most of my controllers have that capability. There's also a trick I found if you are using a turbo controller and you get the wings, you can actually hold down the jump button with the wings and with turbo equipped on your controller, and you'll float down really, really slow. And it means that you can fly really far. Or I should say glide really far, because you don't really fly. But it's just a trick to keep in mind. It's something I used because, like I said, I'll use whatever will work with the rapid fire controller. Now, if you're playing it normally, you'd have to do a little bit of a different path with the parts where I fly, because you're not going to be able to fly as far. So it does change it up if you're mashing the button. So this is the first difficulty spike. You're going to notice already it gets way fucking harder than what it's been. So you're already starting off with a bit of a dense area here. Just want to avoid the enemies and jump, on the platforms for now. Nothing too crazy, but remember, it's one-hit death, and it is easy to get hit by various things. So you want to try to clear out the enemies when you can and move through the smokestacks when they're not blowing smoke. The thing with this game is, since it's such a difficult game by this point, the smokestacks don't give you a lot of time to move through. So you got to get through that gap fast once they stop. It's kind of like, the difficulty is really ramping up now and trying to kill you at this point. So this is where you start to see the game getting, quite a bit harder than what it's been. And this is all trial and error. It's just a matter of using save states to practice sections and make sure you got them down. Because something like this, if you don't have that part down, will kill you every time. Now, the video did glitch a bit there, but the idea was when he stopped throwing those cannonballs, that's when I jumped on his head. Of course, it glitched right when I did that, so it wasn't a good demo. But there is a gap when he throws those cannonballs. I think he throws 2 cannonballs or bombs or whatever they are, and then there's a gap. And then you can jump on that pirate guy's head and kill him. So you want to take that guy out, because I'm not sure if there's any other way to get past him. So you got to jump in that gap. But that's what I did there. You got to watch out for these. Whenever you see these guys above you, always pay attention, because those spears will kill you. And this part's tough with all the lightning and all the other shit going on. You just got to really study it and get a good understanding of where your openings are. Like here, that's when I can jump on that guy. But see, I tried to go for another hit. I got killed. I think he takes 2 jumps to kill. But you do have a mid-stage checkpoint, as you see, which I did end up using. But you can see this is quite an upgrade in difficulty from the rest of the game so far. It's a big spike. And it gets a lot worse. So once you get up here, you can kind of bypass the other guy and just jump through to the end. It hasn't gotten too bad yet as far as the difficulty, but it's quite a ramp up from where the rest of the game was. So now things are going to start getting more, aggressive. So now this time you got to jump on these platforms fast, but this is where it starts to get really, really hard. So you want to run on this barrel in the opposite direction to make it go in the opposite direction that you're running, basically, as you see. But what's hard about this is there's a very specific rhythm. That part is extremely difficult. It doesn't maybe look that hard because I did it, but I memorized it. But there's a very specific way that you see me do it. Like in this tutorial, I can't really detail every movement I make because it's going to be too difficult to do that, but I can give you a general idea of what to do. You need to find the rhythm for that part and find that you have to pretty much find that exact movement. And you don't want to move until the parts where you see me moving is when to move. I don't even remember exactly how I did that because I was taking so many breaks with this game. When I beat this part, it could have been many months ago. So it's not crystal clear in my head how I did that part exactly, but the movement was very, very specific. Now you can bypass a lot of these enemies here by jumping on top of those rockets. And the ones that you can't bypass, you can just jump on top of those cards and kill them off to clear them out. These guys you can kind of just jump across, on top of them. But you always want to be aware of the spears that are coming down and all the other bullshit. And you want to look for those openings. You got to be careful with all these guys running around on here and all the spears, because when you bounce off of them, it's easy to get speared. And then you got a fucking hamburger coming down, so there's a lot of shit going on. It's good to take your time and clear a lot of these guys out instead of trying to run through, because it's easy to fuck up. So I was trying to play it carefully. But I also practiced a lot and memorized exactly where I was going to move to and all that shit. It's very trial and error style gameplay, so you really want to like practice each section and memorize it. But you can see the movement is very specific. And the hardest part of this stage is probably that wheel in the beginning that you saw me running on. That was a very hard part and very specific. It's not too bad once you learn the rhythm of it, but it does take a lot of practice to get it down and to understand how it works. You really want to, if you're having trouble with it, really study, the way I moved in that area and like see exactly how I moved through, because I paused at certain points when I was on that wheel, and I believe I let the lightning bolts or whatever projectiles shoot out first, and then I moved. You have to do it in an exact way. And it's kind of, I would have to study it again to really remember exactly how I did it, but it was very specific. So this is kind of a wide jump, as you see, to get back up here. You do get a mid-stage checkpoint at least. It's a little tricky to get to this guy, but you got to wait for that gap. But there's no rush, really. I mean, you have timers, but they give you a lot of time. But as the time gets low, you can see there was like some flying guy starting to harass me. So you don't want to wait around for too long, because they can be annoying. They'll try to kill you if you fuck around for too long. But as long as you run to the right and keep moving, they won't catch up to you. So yeah, that part, once you're on that wheel, you're pretty much done. But you can see that stage was very difficult. So it's going to get progressively more difficult. For the most point, it's going to peak at 4-3. Once you get to World 4-3, that's where that was the hardest stage for me in the game. Once you beat that, you should be able to beat the rest of the game. If you can beat 4-3, you should be good. Beat the rest of the game. I mean, the next two stages are going to be hard, but they're not going to be as hard as 4-3. They weren't for me, at least. So this is the memorization sequence. This is the hardest, I believe, of the roller coaster levels. And this is all memorization. You're going to memorize which carts to ride. You want to switch carts every so often. Green, purple, red, etc. You have to know when to duck, which ones to switch to, which enemies to avoid. All that shit is memorization. So I recommend, just practicing it until you get it. You have unlimited tries, obviously, but there's no checkpoints in the stage, so as far as I know. So you'll have to make your own checkpoints with save states if you want to practice a specific section. Which, if you're dying on a section again and again, I recommend making a save state of that section and practicing maybe the rest of the level or that section. I would usually practice the rest of the stage. And then I would start the stage over and do it legit. So I do recommend that. Save states practice is really the way to beat these kind of games. So now we have another boss dungeon. I don't remember this one being super hard, so it didn't stick out in my memory. It's probably still difficult, but with these Medusas, they shoot rapidly. They don't give you a lot of time. They always shoot two beams. You have to time it just when the beam dissipates the second time, and that's when you move to wherever area you're moving to next. You can see it's very specific. You have to be ready to move, though. As soon as the laser is gone, you want to be ready to move. Now, I got a power-up here, and I was actually able to kill some enemies, so that was helpful. That might be the only time in the game that I actually used a power-up to kill enemies. I don't remember doing that much at all for pretty much the entire game. Usually the treasure chests are put in such a dangerous area, I don't usually try to get them. So I just, try to learn the game normally without getting any power-ups. The wings, sometimes you need to get them to progress. So once you get the wings here, your jump will be super high. And I don't know if there's a way to make a shorter jump once you have the wings. So a lot of times I don't get them. But of course here you need to get them. Now, if you don't like the wings, you could wait for them to wear off if you really don't like them. But you do need them to make that first jump to get up here. I believe they only stay with you for a certain amount of time, so you can, wait them out. But I don't remember them being problematic at this point, so, I kept them. So you got to get in this little gap here. Okay, so this may be an extra life or some shit. I don't know. I think that's what it was. You can get it if you want. You just got to be patient here and wait till you have, clearance to get under these things. It's not a hard part. It is tough with the enemies approaching you while you're going there. If you don't have the power up, that could be tough because, then you got enemies coming at you when you don't have any power ups. So I'm not sure exactly how I would have done that without the power up. That looked like it would have been really hard without the power up. So now on this side of the boat, you're safe. The beam doesn't go across the whole screen, luckily. But I died in this stupid area anyway, so I'm kind of fucked up there. But you want to try to get momentum with the boat and launch as it goes up. It's tricky to get the momentum right on these things sometimes, but you want to jump as it's going up, and it'll shoot you up really high. Now in this area, obviously, don't jump when the beam is out. You just want to watch the beam. You're really going to have to play well with the beams later on. You're going to have to really learn how to deal with them. This part's not bad as long as you float. I recommend using a rapid fire controller and hold the jump button with rapid fire on, and it'll make you float super slow down, and it'll give you a lot of time to dodge those beams. And if you release the button, you'll float down faster. So you want to kind of time it. It may take a little practice, but it's not bad. It's going to be much harder parts. So this is another tug of war. Use rapid fire. Just hold it down, and you'll beat that. And now is where the game gets really, really difficult. At least, 4-3 is anyway. I don't remember 4-1 and 4-2 until I see them, but there's going to be some very difficult parts coming up. So these bonus stages don't mean anything unless you're trying to get points. But they are pretty much meaningless. So yeah, this is the final world, so you are approaching the end of the game. But when I got to 4-3, I actually stopped playing for many, many months. I was pretty frustrated. I just didn't feel like taking the time to really learn it step by step. But, once I did, I was able to learn it in about an hour and 18 minutes, the stage. But it took me around 2 hours and 20 minutes because I probably spent another hour on it many months ago as well. But I forgot everything I learned. So this is a rhythm. Like the rest of the game now, this is very, very much a rhythm. So you want to find that rhythm to the movement, and you want to find that path. And you can keep moving once you do, but this takes a lot of practice to find that rhythm. But it's pretty much always the same, so once you learn it, you can kind of run through the stage. But you just got to keep that rhythm going. You can't jump on the Medusa's heads to kill them, so you just want to be airborne when they shoot their beam, which is a little tricky to time. Now see, I fucked that up, but I think there's a checkpoint by here. So just jump across. You have temporary invincibility every time you respawn from a death. So use that temporary invincibility to bust through areas like I did. But yeah, you want to stay airborne when that beam is active. So make sure to do that. Now here you can kind of just bust through with careful jumps. As long as you're running. You don't need that extra life. It's not really necessary. You just want to beat the stage. Your only focus really should be to beat the stages when you're playing checkpoint to checkpoint, trying to beat the game. So don't worry about that. And that's it. You ride that little boat. This stage was a little tricky, but yeah, this one's not too bad. I didn't have a lot of trouble with this. But you do have to find a rhythm and move fast through the stage. I believe this was the one. Yeah, I guess it was 4-2. Yeah, that's right. 4-2. This was the stage that gave me the most trouble in the game. For me, this was the hardest stage in the game. So you really have to find. You see how I'm doing it. Now you want to get behind the rocks and fall down diagonally, and then duck and let the rocks pass you, and then move to the right. Now keep running and jump across. That's probably the hardest part of the stage. I know it's deceptive, but it was all very learned. It really took a lot of practice how to find that path, because remember that when I watch videos of this game, people are all powered up. So I don't have any starting power-ups, so I can't kill anything. Right? So I have to find the path without being able to kill the enemy, so it's pretty fucking hard. But as you see, if you do it the way I did it, you saw there was a very specific way I moved. So just follow that. Just look at exactly how I did it, and that's what you're going to follow. Now here you just drop down, jump out, and just drop straight down and hope you don't get shot. Most of the time I can get through there, but occasionally I get shot when I do that. So it's a little random for me. But now just take your time and make these jumps, but you don't want to fully hold the jump button for too long, or you'll jump up into the spikes. So you got to get the jump distance just right. Now get these wings and set your control to rapid fire so you can float down really, really slowly. And this allows you to bypass the rest of the stage. I'll show you how that works. I figured this path out. Now if you don't have a rapid fire controller, you probably won't be able to fly as far. So you'll have to make more frequent landings, but it shouldn't be that difficult even without. But if you do have a rapid fire controller, you can really skip by staying up at the ceiling and just kind of gliding down and underneath everything, as you saw me do. Now this stage is not as bad as that previous stage difficulty-wise, but it's still hard. It may have still taken me an hour or so. It's not easy. So you see how I'm getting under those rocks. You see exactly how I'm moving with those rocks. You want to do that just as I did it. Now this part's a little tricky. You want to jump on this guy and hold down so that you're ducked as soon as you finish killing that mole. And then get on that platform, drop down, get the wings, jump up here, and now run across, stomp this guy and duck immediately. And crawl. And now after she shoots, you want to jump across and bounce on these bomb-throwing assholes. So I recommend killing both of them. You don't have to, but it makes it easier. Now crawl onto that log and just let the log take you down. I've never gotten hit once I ride the log down. It looks like you're going to get shot, but you seem to never get shot doing that, so it's safe. So now this part can be kind of tricky. You're going to jump up on this thing here, and you got to try to jump across to the other little platform, like that. And now just jump in place here. The fireballs usually go through you for whatever reason in this area. It's kind of an invincible zone. I don't know why. But you want to climb back up when you get that chance. Once the fireballs are blocked off, climb up. Now you got to stomp on that big cat twice to kill it, and you got to do it while the beam is not present, obviously, or you'll get killed. That's what makes that part hard, is you got to stomp those guys with the beam above you. And as you see, there's a particular time to jump with the Medusa head shooting the ray. Very specific timing to jump everything. And the best I can explain these parts is to look exactly how I'm timing these areas. Because me trying to keep up with it and explain everything step by step is just going to be too difficult for me to do in time with the video. The video doesn't really give me enough time to do that unless I pause or slow the video down, which I've never done before. I don't really even know how to do that. But I do recommend rewinding and checking those sections of the video and seeing exactly what I do if you're stuck. Because you will see how to beat most of these parts without power-ups. You just want to do everything in the order I do it. Now, the Medusa heads, in general, have a very specific timing with the rays. So they always shoot 2 rays, and it's on a very specific pulse and timing that you can kind of memorize the rhythm to it and be ready for it. See? 2 beams, then I jump over the head. 2 beams, then I jump again. Now, this part is hit or miss for me, but I try to bounce on these fish across. But sometimes it doesn't go as planned. Now, stay here and duck. Or just stand and then just go across and drop down, and you're done with the stage. But, yeah, very specific. You really do have to... You're going to have to practice these parts with save states. And, I recommend watching my videos if you don't know what to do, because you'll find the path faster if you see it in a video. You'll be able to figure it out a lot faster. Now, this part I do very quickly. But normally, you jump up on these areas and you crawl across. But I did it very fast here because I memorized the fireballs and I didn't really even stop barely. I just keep moving. because I had to do it so many times. Now you want to do a small jump over these heads when you have the opening, then crawl across to the door. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later, that first part. But for now, you got another rock, paper, scissors game. So you're going to do the same thing you did on it prior with the prior boss. It's the same kind of shit. See, sometimes I win after like 2 moves, and I don't know why that is. But anyway, after you beat it, go all the way to the right, jump up on that block, and crouch down. And hold the jump button while you're crouched down, and you'll spin the orbs around, which will hit the boss. Now, as soon as the boss comes down to you, you want to jump and bounce on his head once, and then stay on that right block all the way to the rightmost. Don't go off and fight him and try to get in a mix with him. Stay all the way on that right block the whole time. See, I got out a little bit there, but I didn't really mean to do that. I wanted to stay all the way to the right block. I found that this method works very well on him, and I'm able to beat him pretty consistently by doing that. Because you're not engaging with the boss across the whole arena where he can hit you with lightning bolts and other one-hit kill attacks. So stay on that right block and just jump on him when he swoops down, jump on his head once or maybe a few times, but get back to that right block. And, keep spinning the orbs. Eventually he will die. Now this part's really not hard, but it's easy to fuck up, and there's no checkpoints in this whole area. So, from where those totems were with the fireballs, before the boss, there's no checkpoints at all in this entire level. So if you die from anything, you start the whole level over. So that's what's kind of hard about this. So you want to run to the right, obviously. Make a long jump here, then make a bunch of short jumps for these logs. And you can do another short jump to get up to the top there. But now you're going to start holding for longer jumps now, as you can see. So you want to hold for the maximum jump height pretty much. Now, if you jump a little bit too far, you want to be quick at correcting it midair and jump again. But the spikes can be random here, as I was saying. And sometimes I get nailed by a spike and I can't correct in time, and I don't know why that is. But it happens to me. See, I almost fell in the lava and fucked up the whole run there from the boat. But the spikes can feel a little bit random. I can't get them to behave the same each time, so you may get hit by a spike randomly, and that's just the way it goes, unless you know a better way to do it. But sometimes there are certain things that feel random that kind of fuck me over, and I just, I accept that I may get hit by them. Like that fireball I was mentioning earlier where you jump down, you jump down in that area and a fireball, you may get shot, you may get hit, you may not. I don't know how to do that consistently to where it won't happen. But that's the basic idea, and for that first part with all those fireballs that I was running through, that's a very hard part initially if you don't know how it works. I will say that you can get those totems that spit out fire to shoot you in a certain direction. If you lure them out a little bit, you'll see they rotate they kind of rotate, and they'll rotate to the left and shoot at you if you're on the left side, and they'll rotate to the right if you're on the right side. So the idea is to try to lure the fireballs out and then move back to the right and then jump through. And whenever you get to those middle platforms, you can kind of crawl on them. If you duck down, the fireballs usually can't hit you if you just duck down in that middle area. But of course, I couldn't really explain that in time, and I learned how to move through that area very fast. There's a rhythm and there's openings to it and a path through it to move very quickly without stopping pretty much. So that's what I did. I just figured out an aggressive path. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.